We are back, and we are very pleased to be joined now by Robin Wansley, Minneapolis City Council member serving Ward 2. Robin is a Democratic Socialist and the first ever Black Independent Socialist City Council member. Robin, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Emma, for having me in Majority Report. I manifested this like 3 years ago, and it's finally happened. So I'm so excited.
Well, I'm so excited to have you because we need more folks like you actually serving in government. Let's start here. What's your background? How did you get into organizing? How did you get into politics?
Yeah, so I think like most regular folks, like I had no choice in many ways. Like that's what prompted my organizing background. When it came to having loved ones that were constantly having contact with our criminal justice system, or growing up on the South Side of Chicago, which if anyone, knows anything about Chicago, also very heavily racially segregated. And the South Side has been relegated mostly for Black people. And unsurprisingly, over in the South Side, that's where we've had the decimation of public housing, public schools, also concentration of poverty jobs, and therefore you see a correlation to over policing. So, and learning that those like conditions didn't just happen on their own; they weren't byproducts of people's individual choices. It became very clear like there were people or systems at fault, and there were people organizing around it. And for me, it was like a easy gravitational pull to be involved in those spaces where, working class people were organizing against poverty, Occupy Wall Street, for instance, or where we're talking about mass incarceration, Black Lives Matter. So I've had that trajectory of being part of these social struggles, the fight for 15, and knowing like throughout those struggles, there were leftists and socialists, Black and brown, Latino socialists that's at the forefront saying capitalism is like the fault of all of it. And so if we're really looking to create different conditions that support our collective well-being, then we also have to be anti-capitalist inherently, and centralize that in the work that we do with working class people. And George Floyd was murdered here in Minneapolis, which caused, one of the most significant uprisings in U.S. history. And I was out here with thousands of others in the streets demanding justice for George Floyd, but a new mandate on public safety. And it felt like the right time to bring in a socialist politics and independent politics into our political, the political beast, which is City Hall, and finally show we can have a different model of political representation that brings in our social struggles, bring in our movements, that brings working class people into this work of putting or creating societies and communities where the needs of the people are prioritized over profits, essentially, over the needs of corporate interests or wants. And I've had the opportunity to do that now a little over 2 years, and really excited to have 2 more years to show the fruits of this work, the fruits of this politics, and how it can transform drastically everyday conditions for ordinary people.
Absolutely. And again, congrats on your reelection. I'm curious, what brought you to electoral politics in that way? Because, socialists and other people on the left, I'm not speaking for everybody, but sometimes electoral politics are not necessarily the avenues for change that people necessarily feel is like the most expedient or the best way to build power. But, you chose to engage with electoral politics at a time when a lot of people are feeling disaffected, especially with, like, say, the Biden administration's support for Israel's genocide in Gaza. How do you get people, socialists and other people on the left, to engage in electoral politics in the midst of this kind of horrible time where people are feeling so disaffected?
Mm-hmm. And, I want to name, I was one of those disaffected folks. For me as an organizer for 10 years here in Minneapolis, oftentimes I was the opposite side of like our local elected officials, like protesting and organizing around demands like a 15 minimum wage or even bare minimum like police reform so we can prevent the shooting and killing of Black and brown people in our communities, I often found myself as a result of that, contesting the decisions made by public officials and also feeling the apathy that everyday people feel in terms of not seeing their political elected leaders really represent their interests and their needs. And again, George Floyd was like a wake up moment, I think, for many of us, where it became clear for me of, these people in elected positions, like we elect them. And while they might betray our interests, like we have the ability to send our folks in. And we should be doing that because, I mean, throughout society, throughout the US history, it hasn't just been public officials that's been creating transformative change. That has always happened through the collective organizing of working class people, and oftentimes having to push elected officials to do the right things, to make the right decisions. And I thought, in the midst of George Floyd, also in prior struggles, like, what if we just had one person, one independent socialist, one person beholden to working class people in these seats to use the bully pulpit that you have as a elected official to bring forward the demands and the aspirations of everyday people, and to then use every tool in your chess box as an elected official to then advance those needs, to bring solutions forward, and then to bring broader, constituencies together around these proposals. And we've been able to do that here in the city of Minneapolis, especially around public safety beyond policing. We're investing in alternatives to just having a cop show up, because we know that is not the model for keeping our community safe. We've been able to even do that around climate initiatives, something as what you would not think is like super radical, but like we just passed pilots for sidewalk plowing here because we had one of the most snowiest winters in our city's history as a result of climate change. And people all across the city was like hurting themselves. People with disabilities, people who have strollers or, with families, they couldn't get around our city. And it's like, well, it should be our responsibility to make sure our sidewalks are clear. That's part of safety. Also with policing, I'm very, very proud of the work that me and my DSA colleagues did early in our term, where oftentimes we were the lone votes against these PTSD settlement claims by officers who were part of this long history within the Minneapolis Police Department of engaging in racist and violent and sexist actions towards, our residents. And then after George Floyd, hundreds of millions of dollars are now being, grabbed up by these officers who left, many of them with bad, horrible misconduct histories, who have lied publicly about what they've done. And we voted down a lot of these, or voted against, a lot of these settlements. And for 2.5 years, it felt like we were screaming into an echo chamber until we finally voted down, the first time this ever happened in the city of Minneapolis history, a settlement claim for an officer that beat and unjustly imprisoned a Black man named Jaleel Stallings.
And he was claiming PTSD?
Yes.
Oh, well, I mean.
Exactly. So, for me, that is the part of hope. Like, we're here to bring hope into these spaces where it's hostile. We know city halls all across the country are hostile to working class people. And that's a charge of socialists coming into these spaces, engaging in the electoral project to show that what we've been told is impossible is actually possible.
And what is it like then to kind of deal with a mayor in Jacob Frey who said a lot of, the right things to the national press in the wake of George Floyd's killing. But in the end, of course, he kind of is quite a status quo Democrat and has vetoed things like the wage increases for gig drivers and for Uber and Lyft in Minneapolis. How do you wield your power when the mayor of the city is somebody much more aligned with, like, say, the neoliberal wing of the Democratic Party?
No, thank you, Emma, for pointing that out, because I want to highlight again where this kind of connects to the prior question of, that apathy towards the electoral project in a way. When you see mayors like Jacob Frey or Eric Adams, or former mayor of Chicago Lori Lightfoot, we're seeing essentially post George Floyd all across the country. There was this conservative backlash movement to this revolutionary moment that happened in 2020 following George Floyd's murder by Minneapolis police. And my council came in right in the re-election of Mayor Jacob Frey. And I want to note independently for my race, like I, had to claw my way into that election. Like the corporate establishment fought tooth and nail to keep me out of office. I had to endure a brutal recount process. So I came in with 14 votes. And in a political minority, with Jacob Frey, as you mentioned, the status quo kind of spokesperson of our city, conservatives status quo spokesperson of our city, I came in the wake of that. And it could have been very easy for me to like play it safe, to say I'm have a low profile until the right conditions align. But that's not what I did, because that's not what the people elected me here to do. I did to not play it safe. I came forward with the mandate to bring working class people's needs and struggles into City Hall. And every single solution that ordinary people brought to my office, we brought it to the floor. Even when I knew I was going to lose, I took a lot of losing votes, often solo losing votes, my first year and a half. But I can't even say they were losses in many aspects, because we forced a public conversation and debate around it. The sidewalk plowing effort that I just talked about, that we just got passed, I brought that a year ago, and it was basically overwhelmingly voted down by my colleagues. And then we did lots of organizing. And again, climate change created the conditions for working class people to say what we're doing around sidewalks is not working. So it got to the point where a year ago, one pilot for sidewalk plowing got voted down. This past year, after a lot of organizing, we got 4 that's going to be invested in. Same with public safety beyond policing. Jacob Frey, or Mayor Jacob Frey, definitely has been a proponent of keeping policing as the same, in the way of, keeping cops with, extensive misconduct histories on the force, and basically keeping the same conditions that led to George Floyd and so many other stolen lives. And we've been here, my office has been here as an echo chamber saying we need something different. We have to organize for something different, organizing for something different. And what we've gotten is a new Office of Community Safety that prioritizes unarmed safety services like mental health responders. So now when regular folks call 911, they don't just have to hear about a cop being the only option to show up. They now have mental health responders. They have domestic violence navigators. And my office just passed $4 million last month to invest in other, safety alternative services to meet the needs of our residents. So, we have to still be willing to bring the issues forward, even under conservative or minority political climates. And that's why Minneapolis has the progressive majority, with 4 of the elected officials of that majority being DSA endorsed. Yeah, it's because we weren't afraid to take the losing vote and bring it to the floor every single time.
I mean, I've spoken about this within the context of, we're here in Brooklyn, right? Like, what can be done? And there have been major DSA gains in New York's state government. But at the same time, the governor, I know this is more on the statewide level as opposed to city, but Governor Kathy Hochul, very, very conservative Democrat. However, you see different ways that the leverage of just having a few of those folks in government has changed things dramatically, including her center-right anti-labor state Supreme Court pick getting shot down because the DSA candidates here, not candidates, representatives here in New York were able to make that change. And that's just one of the ways that things can change, and leverage can change quickly once you get people who are actually representatives into office as opposed to representatives of other interests.